Hello and welcome back to the Out of Program podcast. So today we're joined by Dr Alice McGee. She is founder and managing director of Mara Health, a consulting company in digital health, health technology, pharma and biotechnology. She also holds a prominent role as a senior medical advisor for Flow, a health tech unicorn in the female health space, and most recently became the chair of NextGen, which is a community for the next generation of health tech and biotech leaders. Welcome to the show, Alice.
Thanks so much, Shing. It's a pleasure to be on.
That's great. So we always start with the same question, which is your time as a medical student. So what was it like for you? What got you into medicine?
Yeah, great question. And I love that, you do the chronological, because I think it's so interesting hearing people's backstory and what inspired things and where did everything come from. I suppose for me, I'm going to be that cliche person who's going to say, I always wanted to be a doctor. I think from a very young age, I was always really interested in medicine. I think in particular when my grandfather had a stroke when I was 7, I think I remember just, not knowing a lot about it. No one in my family was medical. I had an uncle who was a nurse, but apart from that, no one else who was, a doctor or interested in the space. And I think I just wanted to know more and not be scared or intimidated by the hospital, but actually be able to embrace that and understand more about my health, my family's health, etc. So I think probably that's one of the first times I remember it. And I also remember that general thing of being in school and people saying that smart people become doctors. And I just was like, okay, well, I'm doing well at school, so I guess that's what I should go for. So to be honest, I didn't really think massively of anything else for a long time. During primary school, secondary school, and I would say that like I was doing extracurricular stuff from like age 6 or something like that, like French club at age 6 and continued on like so many of us have done. And I think really up until about age 16, 17, when I was doing my GCSEs and A-levels, the only time I ever slightly wavered on it was when I did A-level economics and I realized I really love economics and I really love kind of the business side of things. But then I still was like, no, medicine, stable career path. I'm going to stick with it. Like there's this voice in my head, but no, I'm going to keep going. And I remember my economics teacher said to me at the time, she was like, oh, I lose so many of like my good economists to medicine. I just was like, yeah, I know, but like, that's just the way it is kind of thing. But anyway, so, went on to medical school. I left home in Northern Ireland. I went to Aberdeen to study for 5 years. It was a tough transition at the start, actually, for me. I kind of started over, didn't know a lot of people. And you kind of go from being like really well known in your year group, smart in your year group, to actually like, average in your year group. And you're just like another medical student. But I really enjoyed it, made really good friends. And I suppose just during medicine and during kind of uni, I did kind of explore other things a little bit, but still was very set on medicine. So like I was involved in like the Obs Gynae Society, was involved in like, different teams and different things, but was still kind of very committed and focused on becoming a doctor, doing training and going through the full thing.
That's great. And I think it's a recurring theme that smart kids get encouraged to do medicine because there isn't much imagination in our schooling system for any alternative careers. But it sounded like even in your teens, you realized that whilst you were dead set on medicine, you had some other interests creeping in, but it sounded like to some extent you'd pushed them aside because, you'd already committed very early on. Yeah. And I suppose when you were then a medical student, those interests may have popped up and reemerged. So I guess a continuation on that is, what motivated you to start looking at some of the extracurricular activities as a medical student? Was it a pursuit of passion, or was there something a bit more strategic going on?
Yeah, I think really good question. I think I just was curious. Like I was enjoying what I was learning, but I think maybe it's partially because of that, you're not top of the class anymore. I wasn't getting the same kind of satisfaction of like, doing really well in exams and studying because I wasn't, top anymore. So I think it did kind of in some ways, make me think about, well, what else am I interested in? What else do I like? And I think there's always that push that medics have of, wanting to do something extra. So I think probably one of the most two of the most pivotal things was when I was treasurer of the Obs Gynae Society at the university. So I really enjoyed kind of, getting involved in organizing events for the society. I was involved in the finances of running the society. So a little bit like a business. I mean, not a big scale business or anything like that, but it was still a taste of like, a little bit kind of more managerial, working with people. I really enjoyed that. And I think also too, we had like our student selected component in year 3, where I did a project on women's health research, and I was partnered with Professor Maggie Cruikshank, who's a really renowned HPV researcher, who's still affiliated as emeritus professor with the University of Aberdeen. And I just was really like inspired by her. She'd really built a career that was different because she was like a clinical academic. So she still had, the clinical practice. She was a really respected gynecologist, but also she did a lot of academic work with the university. So she had, I could already see, I guess, and at that stage that like there was something that appealed to me more about the conferences and the traveling and, the kind of like working with people, that sort of thing. So I think that experience with her, and then subsequently I just kind of had like the guts to kind of message her and build up kind of a mentorship type relationship with her after the SSC. I think kind of that and her initial kind of support and belief in me, because I kind of felt quite, I don't know if other medical students felt like this, but I probably felt a little bit, you know not invisible, but maybe just not special during uni. And I think that having, someone who was a mentor to me, kind of advocated for me from third year of uni, really boosted my confidence and really kind of helped me feel like I could do extra stuff, I could do other things. So I say probably those two experiences were two kind of very important things that I did during uni, and got me kind of thinking of other things.
It's really interesting
Yeah,
hearing that story, because we've known each other for a while, but I guess one of
yeah,
the things I love about this podcast is I can really ask the early journey
yeah,
questions. And what I like so much about your story is that I see a lot of commonality in my own journey.
yeah,
I think, to be completely honest, I was a terrible student when I got to medical school. Going from top of my class
yeah,
to, essentially being like an academic failure, that was a really hard pill to swallow. And there's so much of what you described there about not being special. And I guess that creating some of the subtle nudges to then look for, I guess, different USPs, or, try and find other areas where you could excel. I see, from that story, I hear a lot of that in my own journey.
yeah,
And I suppose the other part that I just want to draw attention upon is that involvement in student societies,
uh-huh,
because I completely agree that actually being a student, you have nothing to lose. You can take a lot of risks. The stakes are pretty low, although they can feel really high on
yeah,
some of the things that you're doing. But you do have to operate at a very high level, organizing people, building groundswell, marketing,
mhm,
managing finances. I remember I was part of, similar student societies, MedSocs, various different, specialism-based societies,
yeah.
where I guess they are the training wheels for future clinical entrepreneurs, because they give you a sense of what it means to manage an entire organization.
Yeah, totally. Totally, Jing. And I feel like that's probably one of the things that if I could go back now, I definitely, you stress so much about exams as a medical student, and rightly so, because they are obviously difficult. There's so much to learn. But I do think there's so much opportunity as a medical student to really explore other interests, start a business. There's loads of things you can do. And actually, I think when I look back, probably partied a bit too much at times as well, if I'm honest.
Of
But
course.
I had to do it. But no, I think like there's so much potential as a medical student to actually really explore other interests and really build up experience in, like you said, in a safe way. Because you're not under the pressure of, a job, or the financial pressure that you can have once you've graduated and everything.
And so was the initial interest in research, because you mentioned that you really looked up to this particular mentor, and also you like the idea of conferences and the travel. Did you start off by pursuing more of an academic track?
Yeah, absolutely, Jing. So for me, I think that experience with Prof. Cruikshank really kind of symbolized to me, maybe I couldn't fully articulate what I wanted then, but I think it very much was like to me, okay, clinical academic is a path that I would be interested in. Even though obviously I just had some patient experience at that point, not a huge amount, just being on the wards as a medical student, but it definitely, there was something about, what she did. She was a real specialist in her, or still is a real specialist in her area, really well respected. And I think probably that kind of appealed to me, of being really great at, a particular area and really knowing your stuff in that area. So I think then for the rest of my, time during uni, third, fourth, fifth year, that was always kind of my extra thing. So I was, I didn't actually publish until I left, just by the time that actually, like, how it is with publishing papers. But I always kind of had that as my extra thing. And that kind of just gave me like this confidence boost that, like, I was doing this research work, it was going well. And I really carried that into my foundation years as well. So I think it was always like, if I was having, maybe a bad day on the wards, or like I was finding the clinical side of things hard, I always still find that having that part of my career that's going well, the research part, was a really kind of comfort, but also something that I knew I was working on in the longer term as well.
How much of what you were doing was building up your self-esteem?
I think, I mean, that's quite a deep question, but I think probably quite a big bit. And it's actually something that when I reflect on, even for example, my reservations about, going into economics and, probably thinking about business at a young age, like I really enjoyed some of like the kind of business competitions, like that sort of thing. But I think probably a big thing that always held me back was actually a self-esteem thing, that like, I'm not confident enough to be a business person. But maybe like I'm confident enough to be a doctor. Maybe in some way I felt I didn't need as much confidence, or maybe I don't know what it was. I thought my personality would suit medicine more. But I do think that a part of a lot of the stuff I've done has been to kind of maybe prove something to myself. I think the more you do hard things that you think you couldn't do, it helps kind of build that up. But yeah, I definitely think as we talk, there's going to be a recurring theme of like confidence building by doing these additional things to like, yeah, keep me going.
I know I just asked that question to you, but I think I'm really asking the question to myself as well, because that early journey that you described sounds so similar to what I went through as well. So I'm glad we can have this mutual therapy session.
Yeah, very
But
cathartic.
absolutely. But just moving on then from life as a medical student, we then move on to your clinical training. So talk me through that. What was life like as a junior doctor?
Yeah, great question. I actually find so, again, I don't know if this was a universal experience, but I'd say it was probably relatively universal. When you're a medical student, I often felt like you could be a bit of a nuisance on the ward. Sometimes you would turn up, the doctors who were there maybe wouldn't know what to do with you. They were quite busy. They didn't have something for you to do. So sometimes you would sit and you would be, how do I pass the time? That kind of way. You didn't really feel like you had a purpose or reason to be there. So I actually found that when I started F1, I actually started on a very good kind of, positive note. I stayed in Aberdeen, so I knew the hospital well. I think partially from a confidence thing too. I think I just felt like it was a natural transition. I had like a contact in Prof Cruikshank in Aberdeen. I still had friends who were staying around. I think it was just an easier transition. And actually, my start of foundation years was actually very positive. So I find that, now I had a purpose. I turned up on the ward. People noticed and cared, obviously cared a lot if I turned up each day as the F1. My rotations were, across general surgery, and also later in like GP, ear, nose and throat, etc. But yeah, I actually find the start of working, obviously there was a stress and a step up, but I think especially at the beginning, I just really enjoyed the sense of purpose and reward and actually making a difference and people noticing and caring that I was there.
So it sounds like you had a really positive
Yeah.
experience in that transition from
Yeah.
student to junior doctor.
Yeah.
Were there any elements of disillusionment that cropped up as you started practicing in a in an actual clinical setting?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that, we kind of started at a strange time. So I graduated in 2019 and started clinical, July 2019, obviously just before COVID and the pandemic. So we had a blissful kind of few months of like being junior doctors. Everything was normal. Like it was quite like, good and kind of plain sailing in some ways. And we didn't know what was coming, obviously. And I think then obviously COVID started, end of 2020, rolled on in, into 2020, 2021. So I think that probably, with kind of the exacerbating pressures of COVID on, the workforce, on morale, on, hospital
Mm.
resources, etc. I think that probably kind of the really, positive initial start did wear off, obviously with the pressure of COVID, covering for colleagues off sick, colleagues on longer term absence. I think it was a difficult time for many people on the front line. So I think probably into kind of my F2 year, I probably was a little bit more like, finding medicine tougher, probably finding it like not as, positive and hunky-dory as I did at the beginning. But I do
Mm.
think that a lot of it was still, I was in that bubble of all my friends, not all my friends, but most of my friends were medics too. So we were, dealing with the same thing. It just felt like normal life. And I think it was only, which we're going to come to, I guess, in my F3 year when I really stopped and had like kind of a point which really made me kind of, think through everything and what am I doing. But I think there is a big kind of, I think there is something about kind of being on the hamster wheel and just continuing until maybe something happens. And then you're a bit like, you take a
Mm.
moment to sit back and take stock and you're like, am I actually enjoying this anymore? Or am I just kind of going through the motions? Is this what really lights me up?
Yeah, I think that hamster wheel is very relatable for lots of people that will be listening because m- medicine in particular, it's just so easy to go through the motions. Every year you move up a grade, you do exams just as you did when you were 16. It feels very familiar. The
Yeah.
lifestyle is very unique and there is a peer group and sometimes an echo chamber that kind of holds you there. So I think that's a really pertinent point. I guess you mentioned that in your F3 you started reflecting. You had a bit more slow time. You started
Yeah.
reflecting. So what kind of conclusions did you reach? What kind of interests did you pursue during that period of time?
Yeah, so I think really what happened, Jing, was I went through kind of like career-wise during F1, F2, I was still like, I really want to go for Obs and Gynae, really want to go for Obs and Gynae. Then I was like, just kind of before the decisions, I actually had an offer for GP at the end of my F2, and I was like, should I take it? I was thinking about taking it,
Mm.
but then I was like, no, do you know what? My gut feeling was like, I don't want to be GP yet anyway. I think I still have this something in the back of my head that tells me I should try Obs and Gynae and see, because I'll regret it if, I don't go for it. Because I am someone who like, I don't like regrets. I always like to still go for things.
Mm.
So I turned down the GP offer pretty much at the last minute, like literally a month before
Wow.
the deadline. And I was just like, right, I'm going to go for it. A clinical fellow job came up in Obs and Gynae in the local hospital. So I actually then did Obs and Gynae for my F3 year. And I started then as like a locum ST1. So I was working alongside the other ST1s who were actually, had their training number and had started training
Mm.
and
Mm.
was very much treated like similar way, like
Mm.
they knew I was interested, they knew I was applying. So I was doing a lot of the extra stuff. So I probably in hindsight, probably a little bit my own fault, but I took on a lot of stuff. So I was doing, a lot of research. I took on rota management. I was mentoring younger F1s, F2s. I was really doing everything in one go to really kind of maximize my chances of getting a training post. And also like I really did love it. But I think in hindsight, I probably overdid it. I was doing a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, again, kind of with those pressures still on from COVID, there was a lot of, pressure on our Obs and Gynae rota, a lot of sickness, a lot of kind of covering. The stress of the rota sometimes meant that actually me and my good friend Capney, we actually would end up, we were both rota managers, so we'd actually end up just covering it ourselves because it was easier than asking someone else again to try, could they cover, because we knew that they wouldn't want to. So I think that kind of all came to a head then. I went on a ski trip in February February, March 22, and actually had a knee injury on my ski trip. So I fell badly, fell awkwardly, heard a pop, tore a ligament and fractured the top of my tibia. And
Oh,
when I got back to Scotland, I couldn't work. So I was kind of asked obviously to come back as soon as I could, but realistically I had a very swollen knee. I literally couldn't. The physio signed me off. The GP signed me off on the physio's advice. And I actually had a bit of time to just reflect on everything, obviously sitting on my sofa doing the physio exercises, etc. And I realized for the first time, I was like, I'm actually really not fulfilled anymore by what I do currently. Like I knew that I still loved healthcare. I still loved helping people. I still love women's health as well. But I realized that probably the lifestyle of being, an obstetrician or being, especially I think on the obstetrics side, I just realized that wasn't for me. It's not what lights me up. It actually can really burn me out. And I really was like, what do I want to do with my career here? It was really kind of a pivotal moment. I was like, I really don't want to go back. And actually, I didn't go back. So I actually then did. I kind of thought about it for a little bit, but then I actually gave my notice and actually left Obs Gynae slightly early. So I left in, I think, May time that year. And yeah, basically didn't really have a plan. My partner thought I was crazy. Some of my friends also thought I was crazy. I remember one of my friends actually said to me, like, if you're not a medic now, what are we going to talk about? We spent so much time talking about medicine. I was a bit like, that's a little bit offensive, but okay. But yeah, it was honestly a bit of like, and I think a lot of people who have transitioned from full-time medicine or full-time, practice as any type of healthcare professional, can relate to this, because I think so much is tied up in your identity as a doctor. Like, it's like you're still a person too, but I think there is a lot that's kind of tied up in that in terms of your friendships, your social circle, etc. And also just kind of the work life that you kind of have. So yeah, I really took a step back, really looked at my options. I Googled like alternative careers for medicine. I think at the time, really all I could see was like medical writer or completely retrain was basically kind of the option. So I actually applied for a computer science degree, actually had an offer and really thought about training as a software engineer.
wow.
But then it was actually just not stumble, but a lot of searching on LinkedIn, because obviously I had this free time because I wasn't moving much off the sofa. And I actually came across Hiba Sher Khan, her profile. She was a clinical advisor and also an Obs Gynae reg at the time. I think she worked for Nabla, I want to say, or one of a similar company. And it was the first time that I'd seen, the name like clinical advisor. And I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. That sounds like, I could use my medical knowledge in some way. The sunk cost fallacy, I was just a bit like, I don't want to completely give up on all this time I've spent in medicine. I still do like it, but how can I use this in a different way? So that kind of time of reflection really got my head thinking about what else can I do? What's next?
Wow.
Yeah,
That was quite the journey
there's a
from
lot.
being someone who, in the first half of that, I thought this is a person who is hell bent on becoming an Obs Gynae trainee. And for, I guess, such a pivotal moment, with the injury, and for you to just do such a hard right turn in the way that you describe. Yeah, I guess you must have had a lot of time on that sofa to to think it through. And I suppose, I think what you said about identity is so pertinent. Again, this is a recurring theme that comes through in a lot of these episodes, is that, it's a really hard choice to make because it's wrapped up into who we are, and also our networks are all people whose entire conversations and social experiences are built around the uniqueness of being a clinician.
Yeah.
So, that joke about what would we talk about? I mean, there's, to some extent, that probably is a legitimate fear. Um, so that, I mean, it sounds like an incredibly brave move. And one of the things I note in your background is that you were one of the inaugural fellows at Bitelabs. Was that around that time when you decided to actually expand your knowledge base? What was the motivation for going for that?
Yeah, really great question, Jing. I'm trying to think the exact chronology. I can't remember. I think that Bitelabs was maybe like October, November that year. So it was very, very shortly after all this. So I had come kind of, after that decision to leave Obs and Gynae by, August time, I technically had like my first two clients that I was consulting for through like, a serious amount of cold outreach. Literally had, and this is why what I always say to people, like, I was in Aberdeen, I was not in London, I did not have a connection, I did not have a network. I really did start from zero in like the digital health space. But
Mm.
like it just, I think when there's sheer like determination, when there's a will, there's a way. And I made it work. I really made it work. But also probably still like it wasn't the worst time to do it, because I think I still kind of beat a little bit of, that kind of like NHS, you know, kind of really mass leaving of doctors and really kind of mass movement as well. But yeah, so I had started kind of working in health tech, dabbling, and then I started Mara Health that August. So I got my first clients. I thought I'm going to formalize this, set up a company, and really go for it. And then as part of that, I saw Bitelabs being advertised around that time. And obviously as well, overachiever, I was like, I want to be one of the first. I was like, I want to be one of the first fellows. Like, how cool. And yeah, couldn't resist. I think for me, the big motivation was, first of all, community, because, I didn't know a lot of people in that space. I did, and also a bit of visibility as well, because I knew that if I did it, like, there would be posting about it, involvement, that sort of thing. And then also obviously like the knowledge side as well, because I think health tech and digital health to me at that time was still very kind of open and wide. Like when I first started, all I really thought I could do as a doctor was, content reviews. And it kind of doing Bitelabs really showed me actually, okay, there's so much more to this space. There's so much more I can learn and so much more I can get into. And on the community side as well, like I do remember going to, I think it must have been the opening night in London. And I think we were in Rathbone's office. I think they were the
Mm.
sponsor. And I just remember like really feeling a sense of like belonging. Like I kind of, it sounds really like cliche or something, but this is like I'm being genuine. Like I really felt a sense of like I have a lot in common with these people. We'd all, most people there were like clinicians by background who'd gone into health tech, and I just felt like I had so much in common, like seeing things similar ways. And it was just a really nice feeling of like, and it was just something about it that made me feel I've made the right choice. Even though it was still very difficult at that time, I was like, I'm in the right place now. I kind of felt, yeah,
I
which
mean
is really deep.
that is a real ringing endorsement of the Bite Labs fellowship, it must be said. I'm sure a Zeem and Co will want to take that as a soundbite.
Yeah,
Um, but I think on that, it's interesting because I guess you saw this as an opportunity to build your network,
yeah,
and I think that is so valuable for many who are starting out their careers.
yeah,
Um, People often will join an MBA program, partially for the education, but mostly for the network and the connections. And it sounds like you really found your tribe. I remember when Anis and I started Patchwork, we were very early. There weren't many people doing what we were doing, so it was kind of lonely. And it would have been really nice to have had all these like-minded people to bounce ideas off, because we only had each other for better or worse. Yeah, but now, of course, there's been an absolute Cambrian explosion of startups and accelerators and various different initiatives. But certainly, Byte Labs, was one of the first that I saw, and sounds like it's done some amazing work. Certainly, it's been influential for yourself.
yeah. No, definitely, definitely. And I'm still, in touch with some of the people who are on my first cohort. And I think you have that kind of intense time together working on a project over the 8 weeks. So like you do build up that connection, and it serves you months, years later. So yeah, you definitely remember it.
Mhm. So now we move from the clinical phase of your career
Yeah,
into more of the health tech kind of space.
yeah,
So you currently hold and have held a number of advisory roles, and you also then became a senior advisor for Flow.
yeah.
So do you want to walk me through how you went from, as you've mentioned yourself, having no network, a busted knee, and no clinical job to where you are today. So how did that come about?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you say it like that, Shane, it really starts like I was starting from rock bottom. Like, but I think, yeah, what I would say is, I think first of all, I really had the motivation there. I think I just really knew, I don't know, I just really knew that like my I'll never say never, to be fair. Who knows? Maybe I will do some clinical work again. But I knew at that point that I was just like, this isn't for me anymore. And I have to do something totally different. I just really need a break from this. So what I would say is, I think actually starting out and having no network meant no network, no visibility, no significant experience in the health space. I obviously had my preclinical experience and women's health
Mm,
research background. But it really meant I had to be scrappy. And I really had to be creative and think about, what can I do here? How can I, sell myself? Why would anyone want to hire me or pay me money for this? And I think it actually was a really good exercise. And like, I learned, for now, at that time, I really had to use my women's health research background. That was my strongest thing that I had. So I really used that as like my way in. So I really began naturally as well. Obviously, it suited my interests. So I really started with FemTech clients to begin with. So I worked with Hoopsie, which was an eco pregnancy test. I worked with Luna, founded by Jazz Gambry and Joe. And then I also built up other clients like Aura Fertility, and that sort of and those sort of companies. So I think kind of that early stage was just very much, cold messaging, outreach, really trying to build up a network and build up a name. So I just had to be scrappy and go for it. I posted on LinkedIn, even though it felt so cringe and really like now I get sometimes imposter syndrome about posting, and like I'm like, what do I talk about, what do I post about? But back then I actually was just like, probably more of like, I have nothing to lose. Let's just post stuff. And I definitely had a post or two where no one liked it, but I just had to really, I guess it was like rejection therapy. I just was like, I have to keep putting myself out here. I have to make this work. I just kept going. Um, so probably about a year, that kind of first year from like June 22 to June 23 was really kind of getting my name out there, doing Bitelabs, loads of kind of coffee chats with people, so because I wasn't like money wise, I wasn't like, flying to London all the time, meeting people. I was just doing a lot of
mm,
virtual coffees, one-on-ones, getting to know people, etc. And really building up my network that way, and built up a few more clients, built up a bit more experience. And then got the job at Clue. So it was actually a maternity cover for a science writer, kind of product advisor type job. So it really fit in with the previous work I had done. But it was a really big step for me because I had applied, for full-time jobs before that, but actually wasn't successful. Because I was enjoying the consulting experience and the freedom, but also I was very aware that when I'm not working, I'm not getting paid. So I was quite keen to also build up experience in a full-time role. So that kind of first year was very much consulting, building up visibility, building a network, and then finally got that job at Clue. Got really good experience at Clue, worked there for about 10 months or so. And then the job came up at Flow. And actually, during that time at Clue, I really realized that actually I really wanted to get more AI and product experience. So when the role came up at Flow, I was like, this seems like the next logical move for me. Definitely going to go for it, and actually got the job. So yeah, it was a very kind of makes sense looking back, but at the time didn't feel like it. It was very kind of scrappy and taking a step at a time.
mm, It's definitely the case that you do have to put yourself out there, especially
Yeah,
when you have when you don't have the kind of connections. It sounds like you were really tenacious and you
yep,
just built it all out from the ground up.
yep.
And I think, yeah, actually, just to reiterate on that point about really putting yourself out there, I think many
Hmm.
people are quite afraid. Even
I
today,
think so.
I struggle to write things on LinkedIn. Because I do think, what do I have to say above all the kind of experts
That's
out there?
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
and
it's kind of reassuring that you would say that, but like also mad to me because there's so much you can talk about. But okay.
yeah, I think we all have our maybe not like psychological blocks when it comes to those things, but I've never been a very kind of I've never been very expressive on these kind of platforms, and I see others who are so pithy and so like eloquent or insightful. It's definitely an area that I should think about a bit more. So I think at the very least this conversation has inspired me, of
Good.
all people, to to take a look into this.
Amazing.
So when you got to Flow, this seems like, quite a prominent opportunity for yourself. How did you find, in terms of your skill set, in applying that to an organization like Flow? Because as I mentioned before, Flow is now, a super successful consumer femtech startup. £1 billion valuation. Many would probably listen to this and think, wow, she's gone from a lot of clinical expertise, been super scrappy to get the kind of roles and build out her portfolio of work. But then what's it like actually like landing in? How did you find the transition from being a clinician to then working in presumably an operational role?
Yeah, no, really great question. I think I would say what was really helpful was having that initial experience with Clue for those first months. Clue at the time was about 100 employees around that time. So I did get that kind of experience of, working in an organization, working in a, multidisciplinary team of like engineers, product people, marketing, etc., which was obviously there's a lot of parallels that you can pull from clinical, but it is actually, very different in terms of working from home all the time, using lots of new software, having software that actually works well and works fast. So I think that Clue definitely was a really big help in getting me ready for the job at Flow. So like when I started at Flow, I already had a good experience of all that kind of I had done at Clue already. So really when I joined at Flow, actually probably one of the hardest things was really the AI focus. So I interviewed for the job, was very honest about the fact that I actually didn't have at that time a lot of AI experience before, but I did tick all the other boxes and very much. I think it's one of those examples of where you apply for something that you're not fully hitting. And I know women are apparently very bad at doing that, but I wasn't in this
Mm.
case. But in this case, I was like, I'm going for it. And I really demonstrated though that I was really keen to learn. I really wanted to work at Flow. I'd, tried to get in before. And I think probably the biggest thing was actually kind of the steep learning curve I had, especially at the beginning, working with, people who were machine learning engineers, knew a lot about AI. And I was really coming in, having a good kind of product content base, a bit of clinical safety work already, which helped. But actually on the AI side, being a complete newbie. But I think actually, again, I think it was that kind of like determination and like, really wanting to learn it, get experience in it. And also as we've seen and as we know, healthcare and so many industries are, going so, hugely into AI that I knew from a career point of view, yes, it would be painful. Yes, I would feel like, the most stupid person in the room, but I was like, this is probably a transition that I'll have to do at some point anyway. So I think that was probably, I would say, Jing, the hardest bit was really that kind of starting a little bit from scratch. But I think it's like with every stretch that you make in your
Mhm.
career, in your life, it's like you have to just accept that you're going to be bad, but it's going to get better. And that's exactly what happened to Flow. Like the first few months were, quite tough. I actually wasn't enjoying it at times, if I'm honest, but then actually started to get, up to speed on things, kind of build confidence in that area. And then now, really enjoy it over a year, nearly a year and a half later.
Excellent. And I suppose that brings us now more to present day. And there's two things that I wanted to touch upon. The first is next gen, and the community that's been set up, and the other is your writing, because you also have a Substack, a newsletter called Your Next Move.
Yeah.
So talk me through kind of how those things kind of came about.
Yeah, great question. I think so. I'll speak about the newsletter first, just because of chronology, basically. The
Yeah.
newsletter I had thought about for a while. I first created my Substack in May 24. So I actually sat on it for about a good 6, 7 months, not actually writing anything or putting myself out there. I think I just kind of saw, the popularity of Substack growing, I think I also felt that there's something a little bit more organic feeling about Substack and writing a newsletter than there is about kind of random LinkedIn posts. I just felt like it was a bit more cohesive, and you would probably get to know me a little bit better through that
Mm,
kind of medium. So I think that was kind of my motivation. So very much, trying to find a way to have my voice in a way that felt like authentic, and didn't feel like a forced, scheduled LinkedIn post about one random topic. I felt like it allowed for a little bit more creativity. I think also too, especially kind of given my background and how I've kind of done what I've done, I really genuinely, and I mean this genuinely, I have a very huge passion for helping anyone else who's going through something similar to what I went through. I think like I really love to empower people, and really, no matter what you're doing, like, entry level job, very senior job, I think it's always great to look for, what's next. And I don't mean next as in like, what's your next job? I just mean like, what's, I guess it's kind of like, through uni, what I had that kind of, I'd research keeping me motivated, keeping me going. I think it's always nice to have that thing that if, for example, the day job isn't going as well as normal, you have that extra thing or that thing that you're focusing on or working towards that keeps you going. And that's kind of where the your next move came from. So like kind of inspiring and empowering people to think about their next move, to share job opportunities, to share learning opportunities, and always kind of keep people feeling like they're moving forward in their career, doing something else. Because I naturally kind of like searched for that stuff, and I just was like, I need a place to kind of share this because I'm seeing all these
mm,
job opportunities. I want to share them with people. It makes sense. So finally, January this year, I was kind of just like, it's now or never. You either post by the end of January or you're never doing a newsletter, I told myself. So I posted by the end of January and finally got it done. But also, huge imposter syndrome doing it. At the start, I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. But it's actually grown steadily. And I think also then, getting then the next gen position. So next gen happened shortly after, actually coincidentally, but the synergy between what I do with my newsletter and then next gen is, very, very similar. So next gen
mm,
is a community for upcoming leaders in health tech and biotech. Original idea and funded by James Somaru of Somex, who, everyone knows in health tech. So James came up with the idea, advertised for a committee, and I went for it. And I think luckily, again, with that kind of network and support, actually then got the chair position. And again, it's just been a real kind of, real fun project, bringing people together, sharing knowledge, really building this community from scratch. And they've gone really well together. So NextGen's really complemented my newsletter and vice versa. And yeah, we've had 3 events so far, been really successful, sold out. We've secured some really cool sponsors like Hardian Health, MedTech World, Health Europe. And we're really on to like, big things. And I have a really, really great committee behind me. There's 7 others on the committee who are amazing in this space. And
mm.
yeah, we've just got a great community of people who are really engaged, interested, and passionate. So really enjoying this kind of extra arm outside of like my flow work of like, giving back and doing something for the wider community.
Brilliant. Sounds like it's going fantastically well. And
Yeah.
speaking as a subscriber to your
You
Substack,
are. I
I have
didn't
to.
know. Oh, amazing. I'm honored. Yeah.
I'm surprised you're not obsessing, looking through all the subscribers. But yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah, I really enjoy it, and I think what you said about like your own personality,
Yeah.
coming through, like I think that's really clear when reading it. So for anyone in the audience who's listening, you should definitely subscribe to your next move. Now we're running out of time, so I'm going to finish off with a final question.
Yeah.
Um, which is because I think we've kind of come to present day.
Yeah.
And I suppose to wrap things up, what kind of practical advice would you give to other clinicians, other students who are considering leaving the traditional path?
Wow. There's there's so much advice I could give. And definitely like not a plug, but like do like feel free to like follow me, reach out, like ask questions. Like very happy to help people going through that. I honestly, if I was to give one piece of advice, I think it would just really be two. Really, first of all, go for it. I think like if you have a gut feeling that you should be doing something else, or you've got an interest that you can't, get rid of, you really want to do something else and you're thinking about it, despite what other people say, maybe your friends, your peers, parents, mentors, I think it's really important to explore it, because I think you owe it to yourself and, potentially the wider kind of population, because you could do something really amazing and really huge that could impact people's lives. So I think I would definitely say go for it. Like, don't doubt yourself. And then I think kind of the second thing I would say, which is similar to what I did, I think like, do empower yourself and really look at what can you offer. So really do a good analysis of your skill set, what you like, what you don't like, and how you can position yourself well in another industry. And I think like sometimes as doctors, because and other clinicians, we're trained, to do certain things in the hospital, a very specific skill set. We feel like we can't do other things, but actually there's, you're a smart person, you're trained, there's so much you can do. So I would say really just go for it, and, don't be afraid, really empower yourself, and make the move and explore. And you can always, you can always go back. If it doesn't work out, you can go back to clinical practice. You can do a locum shift in the bank. You can maintain your license, your registration. So it's always good to do that, and then course correct if it doesn't work out. You've got nothing to lose.
Brilliant. So that's all the time we have
Yeah.
for today. Thank you for joining me, Alice. And for those listening, if you like what you hear and want to support the show, please do like and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or whatever podcast platform you're currently listening to us on. It'd mean a lot to me, and it would help spread the message to others exploring alternative paths. So thanks for joining us, and see you next time.